The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than any building on Earth. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds could form inside it. Thousands of alien creatures filled the massive space. Their voices created a sound like ocean waves, crashing against rocks, but today the sound was different. Today it was the sound of laughter. Mean, cruel laughter that echoed off the crystal wall's ambassador. Deho stood at the center of it all. His black hair was perfectly combed and his blue uniform showed not a single wrinkle. He had practiced this speech for months. He knew every word by heart. But as he looked out at the sea of alien faces, he felt very small and very alone. Vorthok delegates were the loudest. They looked like giant lizards with green scales that shimmered in the light. Their yellow eyes glowed with amusement as they pointed at the human with their clawed fingers. Some of them were so busy laughing they forgot to close their mouths. Their forked tongues flicked in and out like snakes tasting the air. Next to them sat the Zentari. The crystal beings looked like living diamonds. They had no faces as humans understood them. Instead, they communicated through colors and sounds that rang like bells. When they found something funny, their bodies glowed brighter and their chiming became faster. Right now, they were practically blinding everyone around them with their bright flashing lights. The nebulans were harder to see. They looked like colored smoke that had learned to think. Their gas bodies swirled in patterns that meant different things. The pattern they were making now was the same one they used when they saw something pathetic like a dying animal or a broken machine. In the highest seat sat Council Prime Vexstar. He was the most important alien in the galaxy. His species looked like spiders, but they walked on 2 legs instead of 8. His 6 arms moved constantly as he spoke, each one making different gestures. His voice was deep and commanding. And when he laughed, the whole room seemed to shake. Humans, he said, and the words sounded like an insult coming from his mouth. You dare to ask for equal representation in this council? You think your little species deserves to sit with us as equals? The laughter grew louder. Some of the younger aliens were pointing at Deho and making jokes in their own languages. He did not understand their words, but he understood their meaning. He had heard it all before in a dozen different ways on 100 different worlds. We have served faithfully for 50 years, Deho said. His voice was calm and steady even though his heart was beating fast. Our engineers built the quantum relay networks that connect your worlds. Our soldiers died defending colonies that were not even human colonies. Our scientists solved the Red Death Plague that almost killed 3 entire species. The Prime's 6 arms waved dismissively. Servants, he said. You describe the work of servants, not equals. Humans are useful, yes, but so are our mining machines, so are our cleaning robots. You do not give voting rights to a robot. Behind Deho, the other human delegates sat in silence. Captain So Young had been a soldier for 20 years. She had fought in the border wars and the siege of Kepler Station. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. She wanted to stand up and tell these aliens exactly what she thought of them, but she knew it would not help. Dr. Wu Jin was the smartest human alive. He had 3 degrees in quantum physics and had written the textbooks that alien students used to learn about space travel, but none of that mattered here. He stared at his hands and wondered why he had wasted so much of his life trying to help people who saw him as nothing more than a smart animal. Ambassador Jin'ei was the only woman in the group. She had spent 15 years learning alien languages and customs. She could speak fluent Vorthok and knew the proper greeting rituals for 40 different species. She had truly believed that understanding would lead to respect. Now she realized how wrong she had been. Your species is young, continued the Prime. You have been in space for less than 200 years. We have been traveling between stars for over 10,000 years. You are like children who have just learned to walk, asking to run with the adults. The Hive Queen Zixara clicked her mandibles together. This was how her insect species showed agreement. She looked like a giant ant, but with wings that sparkled like metal. Her compound eyes reflected the light in thousands of tiny pieces as she looked at the human delegation. The human asks for representation, she said in her clicking voice, but what has his species contributed that we could not do ourselves? They build machines, yes, but we have better machines. They fight wars, yes, but we have better soldiers. They cure diseases, yes, but we have better doctors. More laughter filled the hall. The sound was becoming unbearable. Some of the aliens were now openly mocking the way humans walked or talked. A group of young Zentari were changing colors to look like human skin, their crystal bodies turning pink and brown and crude. Imitation Deho felt something cold settle in his stomach. It was not fear exactly. It was something else, something that made him stand a little straighter and speak a little clearer. "Is that your final answer?" he asked. "Humanity requests equal representation in the Galactic Council. Do you refuse this request?" The Prime looked around the hall at all the other delegates. They were all nodding and clicking and flashing their agreement. The decision was unanimous. The humans would remain second-class citizens in the galaxy. They had helped build. "We refuse," said the Prime. "Humanity may continue to serve the Council as they have always done. But they will not have voting rights. They will not have equal representation. They will accept their place as junior partners." In galactic civilization, the hall erupted in cheers and applause. The aliens were celebrating their victory over the presumptuous humans. They had put the upstart species back in their proper place, but Deho was smiling. It was a small smile, barely visible at the corners of his mouth, but it was there. The other human delegates saw it, and they began to understand. Captain So Young loosened her grip on her chair. Diarwu Jin looked up from his hands. Ambassador Jin-A straightened her shoulders. "Very well," Deho said quietly, but somehow his voice carried through all the noise and laughter. "If that is your final decision, then humanity accepts its place." The aliens started to quiet down. Something in the humans' tone made them uncomfortable, but they could not figure out what it was. "The human delegation will return to Earth tomorrow," Deho continued. "We will inform our governments of the Council's wisdom. We will tell them exactly what the galaxy thinks of humanity's contributions." He bowed formally. It was a perfect bow, showing exactly the right amount of respect. But somehow it felt like a goodbye. "We thank the Council for making their position so clear," he said. "There will be no misunderstandings about where humanity stands." In the galactic order, as the human delegation filed out of the hall, none of the aliens paid much attention to them. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their clever handling of the situation. The humans had been put in their place and would continue to serve without complaint. They did not notice that none of the humans looked back. They did not notice that the humans walked with their heads held high. They did not notice that Ambassador Deho was still smiling, that small, quiet smile. They would remember that smile later, when everything started to fall apart, when the galaxy began to crumble without human hands to hold it together, when they realized that the servants they had dismissed so casually were the ones who had been keeping their entire civilization running. But for now they celebrated their victory over the presumptuous humans who had dared to ask for respect. It would be the last time they would ever have reason to celebrate anything involving humanity again. The exodus was so quiet that most of the galaxy did not notice it happening at first. Human traders who had carried goods between the stars for decades simply did not renew their shipping contracts. Human workers who had built the great orbital platforms and space stations handed in their resignation letters with polite smiles. Human scientists who had spent their lives unlocking the secrets of the universe packed up their research and headed home. Ambassador Chaiwan walked through the halls of the Galactic Trade Commission with a stack of official documents in her hands. She had been humanity's representative to the trade organization for 8 years. She knew every alien bureaucrat by name and could speak their languages fluently. But today she was here to say goodbye. "I regret to inform you that humanity will be withdrawing from the Galactic Trade Compact," she told Director Vexmola, a 6-armed alien who looked like he had not slept in weeks. "Budget constraints require U.S. to focus on domestic priorities." Vexmola's yellow eyes widened in panic. "But the trade routes," he stammered. "Human shipping companies handle 40% of all galactic commerce. Without them, the entire system will collapse." Chaiwan smiled politely. "I'm sure you will find adequate replacements. The galaxy has many skilled species. I am confident they can manage without primitive human assistance." She placed the withdrawal documents on his desk and walked away, leaving behind 8 years of careful relationship building and trade negotiations. Vexmola stared at the papers and felt his world crumbling around him. On the industrial world of Kepler 442b, Foreman Grickstock stood in the middle of his empty mining facility. The massive machines that had carved precious metals from the planet's crust sat silent and still. His human workforce had vanished overnight, leaving behind only their safety equipment, and a note thanking him for the opportunity to work together. Bring in Zentari workers, Grickstock ordered desperately. They are skilled with machinery. But when the crystal beings arrived, they found they could not interface with the human-designed systems. The mining equipment required biological operators who could feel the vibrations in the rock and sense the stress patterns in the metal. The Zentari tried to adapt their crystalline forms to the machinery, but every attempt ended in catastrophic failure. The systems are too complex, chimed the lead Zentari. Engineer, they require intuitive understanding that our logical minds cannot provide. Grickstock felt his foreheart sink. The humans had made the work look so easy that he had never realized how difficult it truly was. Now he understood that the primitive mining techniques were actually incredibly sophisticated, requiring decades of experience and knowledge that could not be easily replaced. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. The great hospital ship Mercy of Stars drifted powerless in space after its human medical staff departed. The alien doctors who remained found they could not operate the sophisticated life support systems that kept thousands of patients alive. Dr. Vortha Keeler Salix stood in the empty operating theater staring at the human-designed surgical equipment. The machines were silent and dark, their displays showing only error messages he could not understand. How do we activate the molecular repair systems? He asked his assistant, but the young Vorthak could only shake his head. The human doctors never wrote down the procedures. Came the reply, they said it was too complex to explain in simple terms. Salix felt sick. The humans had been treating the most difficult cases for years, performing miracles that had seemed routine. Now he realized those miracles had required knowledge and skill that the aliens had never bothered to learn on. The orbital platform New Constantinople. The alien residents watched in growing horror as their carefully maintained environment began to fail. The human engineers who had designed the platform's life support systems were gone, and no one else knew how to keep the complex machinery running. The platform's commander, Admiral Chixara, paced frantically in her office as report after report of system failures flooded in. The artificial gravity was fluctuating wildly, making everyone sick. The air recycling systems were producing toxic gases instead of breathable atmosphere. The water purification plants had shut down completely. Contact the human engineering firms, she ordered. Offer them triple pay to return and fix these systems. But when her communications officer tried to reach the human companies, they found only automated messages explaining that the firms were no longer accepting off-world contracts. The humans who had built and maintained the galaxy's infrastructure were focusing on their own territories. Now on Earth, Director Nara sat in her office reading intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The exodus was proceeding exactly as planned. Human citizens were returning home in massive numbers, bringing with them decades of knowledge and experience. The alien governments are starting to panic, reported Intelligence Chief Dongwu. They are offering massive incentives to convince humans to stay, but our people are following the plan. Nara nodded approvingly. What about the critical infrastructure? Failing faster than expected, Dongwu replied. The quantum relay network is down to 30% capacity. The major trade routes are experiencing massive delays. The medical facilities are overwhelmed with patients they cannot treat. And the aliens still think this is temporary. Most of them, yes, they believe. We are throwing a tantrum that will end when we realize how much we need them. Nara's smile was cold. They have it backwards. We are about to show them how much they need us. Dr. Minsu had spent 20 years developing agricultural techniques that could feed entire worlds. His methods had ended famines and transformed barren planets into garden worlds. But now he stood in his empty laboratory on the colony world of Harvest, prime packing the last of his research equipment. You cannot leave now, pleaded Administrator Klextar, a desperate alien whose people face starvation without the human farming techniques. The growing season is about to begin. Without your methods, our crops will fail. Dr. Minsu looked up from his packing. I have uploaded all my research to your computers. The procedures are clearly documented. I am sure your people can follow simple instructions. But they both knew it was not that simple. The human agricultural methods required constant adjustment. Based on weather patterns, soil conditions, and dozens of other factors that changed daily, it was as much art as science and could not be learned from reading files. "Please," Kleckstar begged, "my people will starve." Dr. Minsu felt a moment of sympathy for the alien administrator, but then he remembered the laughter in the council chamber, the mocking voices that had dismissed humanity as primitive servants. "I am sorry," he said quietly, "but I have my orders. We are focusing on domestic priorities." Now, he picked up his cases and walked out of the laboratory, leaving behind 2 decades of work and the knowledge that had fed billions. Kleckstar stared at the empty room and knew that his world was about to face the worst famine in its history. President HFY stood before the joint session of the Human Colonial Parliament as representatives from every human world gathered to hear her speak. The great chamber was filled with men and women who had built the galaxy's infrastructure, healed its sick, and fed its hungry. "For 50 years we have given our best to the galaxy," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We have served faithfully and asked for nothing but respect in return. Instead, we have been treated as servants and primitives." The chamber was silent, but she could feel the anger and hurt that filled the room. "Today we begin a new chapter in human history," she continued. "We will no longer beg for recognition from those who see us as inferior. We will build our own future and let the galaxy see what it has lost." The applause was thunderous, but there was no joy in it, only grim determination. The humans who had served the galaxy so faithfully were walking away, and they were taking their knowledge with them. The aliens who had mocked them would soon learn what the galaxy looked like without human hands to build it, human minds to run it, and human hearts to care for it. It would not be a pretty sight. 1 year had passed since humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs. 1 year since the last human engineer had walked away from an alien construction site. 1 year since the last human doctor had treated an alien patient. 1 year since the last human teacher had tried to share knowledge with alien students. The great council chamber that had once echoed with arrogant laughter now buzzed with worried conversations and panicked reports. The proud alien delegates who had mocked humanity's request for respect now looked like frightened children facing a disaster. They could not understand. Prime Vextar no longer sat tall on his throne. His 6 arms trembled as he held report after report of system failures and social collapse. His green scales had turned a sickly yellow color, and his yellow eyes darted nervously around the chamber. "The outer rim colonies are dying," reported Admiral Chixara, her insect features twisted with despair. "Without the quantum relay network communication, delays have become unbearable. Some colonies have been cut off for months. Their supply ships cannot find them in the vast darkness of space." The Admiral's compound eyes reflected the emergency lights that now filled the chamber. Many of the normal systems had failed, and the aliens were learning to live with constant mechanical breakdowns. "The medical crisis is spreading faster than we can contain it," added Dr. Vorthik Healer Salix, his forked tongue flicking with anxiety. "The Red Death has returned on 17 worlds, and we cannot manufacture the human vaccine. Our attempts to synthesize it have failed. Every time we think we understand the formula, something goes wrong." Salix had lost weight, and his scales were dull with stress. He had watched thousands of patients die from diseases that humans could have cured easily. The sophisticated medical knowledge that had seemed so simple when humans shared it freely was proving impossible to replicate. "The economic situation is catastrophic," reported Counselor Drexman, his tentacles writhing with desperation. "Human trade routes connected 60% of galactic commerce, not 40% as we originally calculated. Without them, entire sectors are cut off from vital supplies." The counselor's purple skin had turned gray with worry. His species, the Mallory, had built their entire economy around trade routes that humans had designed and maintained. Now his people faced poverty and starvation as the carefully balanced system collapsed. "Food riots have broken out on 12 worlds," continued another delegate. "The agricultural techniques the humans developed cannot be replicated. Our crops are failing and our people are starving." The crystalline Zentari representative had dimmed to barely visible levels, her light so faint it was hard to see her in the chamber. "We have attempted to contact Earth through every diplomatic channel available," she chimed weakly. "The humans respond politely, but they cite internal challenges that prevent them from offering assistance. They are lying, hissed Delegate Korthax, a young Vorthak whose scales were bright with anger. This is clearly revenge for our decision in the council they are trying to force us to give them. Representation through blackmail, but even as he spoke the words he knew they sounded hollow. The humans had not made any demands. They had not threatened anyone, they had simply walked away and focused on their own affairs. Then we should give them what they want, whispered the Nebulan representative, his gaseous form flickering with desperation. If representation is the price for restoring stability, we should pay it. The chamber erupted in angry protests, but the voices were weaker than before. The proud species that had once mocked humanity's request for equality now found themselves in the humiliating position of needing help from the very beings they had dismissed as servants. We cannot bow to human demands, declared Prime Vextar. But his voice lacked conviction. We are the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. We cannot be held hostage by a species that has barely learned to walk upright. But the reports kept coming in, and each one was worse than the last. The great orbital cities were falling out of their carefully calculated orbits as the human navigators who had maintained them were gone. The massive industrial platforms that had produced goods for thousands of worlds sat silent and abandoned on the mining world of Kepler 442b. Foreman Grickstock stood in the ruins of his operation. The alien workers he had hired to replace the humans had tried their best, but they lacked the intuitive understanding that made human miners so effective. The extraction rate is down 80%, he reported to his corporate bosses. The Zentari workers cannot feel the rock patterns. The Vorthak workers are too large for the tunnels. The Nebulan workers cannot maintain solid form in the high-pressure environment. The mining company executives listened to his report with growing horror. Their profit margins were disappearing as costs skyrocketed and production plummeted. Similar reports were coming in from mining operations across the galaxy. Hire more workers. They ought to pay whatever it takes, but there were no more workers to hire. The aliens had never learned to do the jobs that humans had made look easy. The primitive techniques that the galaxy had dismissed were actually incredibly sophisticated, requiring years of training and experience that could not be bought with money. Dr. Vorthak healer Salix sat in his empty laboratory staring at the human medical equipment that he could not operate. The machines were still there, but they might as well have been alien artifacts from a lost civilization. How did they make it look so easy? He wondered aloud. His assistant, a young Vorthak named Krikstal, could only shake his head. The human doctors never explained their methods, Krikstal replied. They said we would not understand the complexity. Salix felt sick as he remembered his own arrogance. He had dismissed human medicine as primitive compared to Vorthak healing techniques. Now he realized that the humans had been performing miracles every day and making it look routine. Send another message to Earth, he ordered. Offer them anything they want. Full research partnerships, unlimited funding, complete access to our medical databases. But when the message came back, the reply was the same as always: polite regret and explanation that human medical facilities were focusing on domestic priorities. On Earth, Ambassador Deho sat in his office reading the increasingly desperate messages from the Galactic Council. Each communication offered more concessions, more recognition, more acknowledgement of humanity's value. They are offering us everything we asked for 3 years ago, he told President Ayad during their weekly meeting. Equal representation, shared governance, mutual defense pacts. The works president looked out the window at the bustling human city below. In the distance, she could see the construction sites where human engineers were building new technologies that would make the old galactic systems look primitive. And what is our response? She asked. The same as always, Deho replied. We thank them for their kind offer, but explain that we are too busy with internal affairs to participate in galactic government. The president smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not particularly kind either. They still do not understand, do they? They think this is a negotiation. No, Deho agreed. They think we are playing their game of politics and power. They do not realize that we have left the game entirely. Dr. Haiyan Wu entered the office carrying a tablet full of reports from human research stations. Our isolated development is proceeding ahead of schedule, he announced, without the need to share everything with alien partners. Our scientists are making breakthroughs at an unprecedented rate. What kind of breakthroughs? Asked the president. Quantum computing that makes the old relay network look like smoke signals. Dr. Hyen-Woo replied, medical techniques that can regenerate. Entire organs terraforming technology that can make any world habitable in months instead of decades. The president raised an eyebrow. And the aliens have no access to any of this, none whatsoever, Dr. Hyen-Woo confirmed. We are developing technologies they cannot even imagine while they struggle to maintain the systems we left behind. In the council chamber, the alien delegates continued their desperate discussions, but they were no closer to a solution than they had been a year ago. The humans had withdrawn completely and showed no interest in returning. Perhaps we should consider unconditional surrender, suggested the Nebulan delegate. Give them complete control of the council and beg for their mercy. The suggestion was met with horrified silence. The proud species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia could not imagine bowing to the humans they had once mocked, but as the reports of system failures and social collapse continued to pour in, they were beginning to realize that pride might be a luxury they could no longer afford. The galaxy was falling apart, and the only people who knew how to fix it were the ones they had driven away. 2 years had passed since the human exodus, 2 years since the last human engineer had walked away from an alien construction project. 2 years since the last human doctor had saved an alien life. 2 years since the galaxy had learned what it meant to live without the species they had dismissed as primitive servants. The Galactic Council chamber was a shadow of its former self. Half the seats were empty because the species that had once sat in them could no longer afford to send delegates. The great crystal dome that had once sparkled with alien technology was now cracked and dark. Many of the systems that had made the chamber a marvel of engineering had broken down without human maintenance. Prime Vextar was no longer Prime. He had been removed from power when his people realized that his arrogance had helped destroy their civilization. The new Prime was a female named Kelatar, who had spent her entire career studying human culture. She understood better than most how badly the council had miscalculated. We need to face the truth, she said to the pathetic gathering of alien delegates. Our civilizations are collapsing. The Vorthek Empire has split into 7 warring factions because we cannot communicate between our worlds. The Zentari Collective is fracturing because their hive mind depends on the quantum network. The Nebulan Trade Federation has dissolved completely. The delegates who remained looked like ghosts of their former selves. The proud beings who had once mocked humanity now struggled to maintain even basic civilization on their worlds. The humans must be stopped, declared Counselor Rexman, a desperate Mallory whose tentacles had turned white with stress. They are committing genocide. Through neglect, they are watching billions die while they hide in their isolated worlds. But Kelatar shook her head. The humans are not hiding, they are thriving. Our intelligence reports show that human colonies are more prosperous than ever. Their technology has advanced beyond anything we can imagine. They are not dying without us. We are dying without them. The truth was painful but undeniable. The humans had not needed the galactic community to survive. In fact, they were doing better without it. Human worlds were peaceful and prosperous, while alien worlds burned with war and starvation. Then we must swallow our pride, said the Hive Queen Zixara, her mandibles clicking with exhaustion. Send a formal delegation to Earth, offer them complete control of the Council, give them everything they want, and beg for their mercy. The suggestion hung in the air like a death sentence. The proud species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were talking about surrendering to the beings they had once considered barely evolved animals. What if they refuse? Whispered the Zentari representative, her light so dim it was almost invisible. What if they simply say no? The chamber fell silent. The possibility that humanity might reject their surrender was too terrifying to contemplate, but it was becoming increasingly likely that the humans simply did not care about the galactic community anymore. On Earth, President HFY stood in the observation deck of the new Sol space station, looking out at the bustling human colonies that dotted the solar system. The stations and habitats that surrounded Earth were marvels of engineering that made the old galactic technology look primitive. The Council delegation will arrive next week, reported Foreign Minister Song Ho. They are bringing offers of complete surrender. Full control of the Council, unlimited access to alien resources, whatever we want they are willing to give. President Aa nodded, but her expression remained neutral, and our response, the same as always, Sung-ho replied. We listen politely and then we decline. We have moved beyond the need for their approval. The president smiled as she watched human ships launch toward the outer colonies. Those ships used technology that was decades ahead of anything the aliens possessed. They could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. They could terraform worlds in weeks instead of years. They still do not understand, she said quietly. They think this is about power and control. They do not realize that we have simply outgrown them. Dr. Hyun-woo joined them on the observation deck carrying reports from human research stations across the galaxy. Our technological development continues to accelerate, he announced. We have solved faster-than-light travel in ways the aliens never imagined. We have developed medical treatments that can extend lifespans by centuries. We have created artificial intelligence that makes their best computers look like pocket calculators, and we accomplished all of this in just 2 years, the president mused. Imagine what we could have achieved if we had not spent 50 years sharing everything with species that gave us nothing in return. The irony was not lost on any of them. The humans had advanced further in 2 years of isolation than they had in 50 years of cooperation. The alien partners who had claimed to be more advanced had actually been holding humanity back on. The dying world of Nexus Prime Administrator Klexstar stood in the ruins of what had once been the galaxy's greatest trade hub. The massive orbital platforms that had processed goods from thousands of worlds now drifted as empty shells in space. The last transport ship departed yesterday, reported. His assistant, a young Vorthak whose scales had turned gray with malnutrition. They are not coming back. The trade routes are completely broken. Klexstar stared at the empty docking bays that had once buzzed with activity. The human logistics experts who had made it all work were gone, and no alien species had been able to replace them. How many worlds are completely cut off now? He asked. Over 300, came the reply. They have no communication with the outside galaxy and no way to request help. Their populations are reverting to pre-space flight technology. The collapse was accelerating as each failure triggered more failures. The quantum relay network was down to less than 10% capacity. The major trade routes had been abandoned. The great orbital cities were falling into their parent stars as their orbits. Decayed Dr. Vorthak Healer Salix sat in his empty hospital watching patients die from diseases that humans could have cured with simple treatments. The Red Death had returned with a vengeance and was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. How many dead now? He asked his assistant. Over 2 billion and climbing, came the horrific reply. The plague is spreading faster than we can count. The bodies. Salix closed his eyes and remembered the human doctors who had worked alongside him. The brilliant Dr. Park Hee, who had developed the vaccine that could have saved all those lives. The dedicated Dr. Kim Jun, who had taught him surgical techniques that seemed like magic. They offered to share their knowledge freely, he whispered. They wanted to teach us everything they knew, and we dismissed them as primitives. Now those primitives were the most advanced species in the galaxy, while the superior aliens died by the billions from problems that humans could solve easily. The Zentari homeworld was experiencing its own collapse. The crystal beings who had once prided themselves on their logical minds were fragmenting into isolated groups that could no longer communicate with each other. The harmonic network is completely broken, reported engineer Quartzinger to the Zentari Council. Without the quantum relays, we cannot maintain the hive mind that has guided our species for millennia. The council members flickered with confused colors as they tried to process this information. Their entire civilization was based on shared consciousness, but now they were trapped in individual crystal shells, unable to connect with their fellows. Contact the humans, ordered the council leader. Offer them our entire crystal forest if they will restore the network. But when the message was sent, the reply was the same as always: polite regret and explanation that human engineers were focusing on domestic priorities. President HFY sat in the human colonial parliament as representatives from across human space gathered to discuss the galactic situation. The chamber was filled with the quiet confidence of a species that had found its true strength. The Alien civilizations are collapsing faster than our worst-case projections predicted, reported Intelligence Chief Dongwu. Some species may not survive another year. Do we have any moral obligation to help them? Asked Representative Park Min. From the Tau Ceti colony, the question hung in the air as the parliament considered the implications. Billions of aliens were dying while humans prospered. Should they intervene to save the beings who had mocked and dismissed them? They made their choice, replied President Aa firmly. For 50 years we offered partnership and cooperation. They chose to treat us as servants and primitives. Now they must live with the consequences of that choice. But the death toll, protested Representative Liang from the Alpha Centauri system, entire species are facing extinction. And whose fault is that? Asked General Taemin, his voice hard with old anger. We did not attack them. We did not sabotage their systems, we simply stopped doing their work for them. If they cannot survive without us, that is their weakness, not our cruelty. The parliament voted, and the decision was unanimous. Humanity would not intervene to save the collapsing alien civilizations, the species that had demanded respect. Through strength would have to find their own way or perish. The galaxy had made its choice, and now it would live with the consequences. The council delegation arrived at Earth with all the pomp and ceremony they could manage, but their desperation showed through their elaborate displays. The alien ships that had once seemed so advanced now looked crude and primitive compared to the sleek human vessels that escorted them to the orbital station. Prime Kelatar led the delegation with her head held high, but her yellow eyes betrayed the fear that consumed her. The other delegates followed behind her like condemned prisoners. Walking to their execution, they had come to surrender completely to the species they had once dismissed as barely evolved animals. Admiral So Young met them at the docking bay. She had been promoted after the human withdrawal, and now commanded the defense of the entire Sol system. Her uniform bore insignia that represented technologies the aliens could not even comprehend. The quantum field generators that powered her ships made their fastest vessels look like children's toys. Welcome to Earth, she said with perfect politeness. I understand you wish to discuss renewed partnership between our species. Prime Kelatar's 6 arms trembled as she spoke. We come seeking mercy, she said the words. 3 months had passed since the human delegation left the council chamber. 3 months since Ambassador Daeho had smiled that strange small smile. 3 months since the galaxy had laughed at humanity's request for respect. The first sign of trouble came from the Outer Rim, territories where the newest colonies struggled to survive in the dark between stars. The quantum relay network that connected these distant worlds to the galactic core had been humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Each relay station was a marvel of engineering that could send messages across impossible distances in mere seconds. Chief Engineer Krath was having the worst day of his very long life. He stood in the control room of Relay Station Alpha 7 staring at screens full of red warning lights. His green vortex scales had turned pale with stress, and his yellow eyes darted frantically between the displays. The relay is losing power, reported his assistant tech specialist Vrick. The quantum matrix is destabilizing, and we cannot determine the cause. Krath's clawed hands moved across the control panel, pressing buttons and adjusting settings that had worked perfectly for decades. But nothing responded the way it should. The human-designed systems were failing one by one, and no amount of vortex engineering could fix them. Contact the human technicians, Krath ordered. They built this system, they must know how to repair it. But when they tried to call the human engineers, they found only empty offices and disconnected communication lines. The humans who had maintained the relay network for 50 years were simply gone on. The planet Nexus Prime, the Zentari engineers, were having similar problems. Their crystal bodice flickered with confused colors as they examined the failing quantum nodes. The human-built components were shutting down in sequence, but the Zentari could not understand why the molecular structure appears stable. Chimed engineer Court Singer, yet the quantum field continues to collapse. We cannot replicate the human manufacturing process. The Zentari had always believed they were the smartest species in the galaxy. Their crystal minds could process information faster than any organic brain, but the human technology was beyond their understanding. Each component seemed simple on the surface, but contained layers of complexity that made their heads spin in. The council chamber Prime Vexstar listened to the reports with growing annoyance, his 6 arms tapped impatiently. On his throne, as engineer after engineer explained their failures, how difficult can it be to maintain primitive human technology? He demanded, they are barely evolved apes with crude tools, surely our advanced civilizations can manage whatever. Simple systems they have left behind. But the reports kept coming and relay stations across the galaxy were failing with increasing frequency. The quantum network that had connected thousands of worlds was breaking down link by link. The engineers tried everything they could think of, but the human systems remained stubbornly broken on Earth in a quiet office building in the city of Seoul. Engineer Minho sat at his desk watching the galactic news feeds with grim satisfaction. The reports of system failures made him feel something he had never expected, a cold, hard pleasure at seeing his life's work crumble. Phase 1 is complete, he said to the woman sitting across from him. Director Nara was a small, quiet person who looked like she might teach children or work in a library, but her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had planned for every possibility. They still do not understand, she replied softly. They think we are just incompetent. They believe they're superior. Alien minds will solve the problems we could not begin. Phase 2. Minho nodded and sent a coded message to human installations across the galaxy. The message was simple, but its effects would be devastating. It contained just 3 words: begin phase 2. Across human space, a quiet transformation began. The research stations that had freely shared their discoveries with alien species went dark overnight. The brilliant human scientists who had worked alongside alien colleagues packed their equipment and disappeared. The medical facilities that had treated countless alien patients suddenly had no room for non-human visitors. Dr. Park Hee had spent her entire career developing treatments for alien diseases. Her laboratory on the colony world of Haven had been a beacon of hope for sick aliens from across the galaxy. She had saved millions of lives and earned the respect of doctors from dozens of species, but now she stood in her empty laboratory packing the last of her research notes into sealed containers. Her alien colleagues watched in confusion as she prepared to leave. Where are you going? Asked Dr. Vorthik Healer Salix, his forked tongue flicking with concern. The plague season is beginning. We need your expertise with the Red Death vaccine. Dr. Parkey looked up from her packing. Her face showed nothing but polite regret. I am sorry, but I am needed elsewhere. We are experiencing resource shortages and must prioritize our own people now. Salix's yellow eyes widened. But you cannot leave now. The outer colonies depend on your research. Without the vaccine, thousands will die. Then I suggest you learn to make the vaccine yourself. Dr. Parkey replied calmly. All the equipment is here. All the notes are in the computer. I am sure your superior alien intelligence will have no trouble understanding my primitive human methods. She picked up her cases and walked out of the laboratory, leaving behind decades of work and the equipment that had saved countless lives. Salix stared at the empty room and felt something cold settle in his stomach. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human teachers left their alien students, human mechanics abandoned their alien employers, human farmers packed up their tools and headed for human space. The aliens who had mocked humanity's contributions were about to learn what life was like without them. On the trade station, Omega-5 Administrator Grickstock watched in growing panic as his human workforce disappeared. Overnight, the massive station processed goods from 100 different worlds, but it depended on human logistics experts to keep everything running smoothly. Where are they going? Grickstock demanded as he watched another group of humans board a transport ship. They have contracts. They cannot simply leave. His assistant, a nervous Nebulan named Drift Current, swirled anxiously. They are not breaking their contracts, sir. They are simply choosing not to renew them. All the human contracts expire at the end of this month. Grickstock felt his 4 hearts skip a beat. All of them at the same time. Yes, sir, it appears to be a coincidence. But Grickstock knew it was no coincidence. The humans were leaving and they were taking their knowledge with them. The complex systems that kept Omega-5 running had been designed by human engineers. The scheduling algorithms that coordinated thousands of shipments had been written by human programmers. The maintenance procedures that kept everything working had been developed by human technicians. Within a week, the station was in chaos. Ships arrived to find their cargo bays occupied by previous deliveries. Automated systems began making mistakes that cascaded through the entire network. The alien workers tried to fill the gaps left by their human colleagues, but they quickly realized they had no idea how most of the station actually worked on. Earth President AI held a secure video conference with the leaders of every human colony and research station. Her face appeared on screens in secret locations across the galaxy as she addressed the quiet revolution that was taking place. "The Council wanted to know our worth," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of human space. "They dismissed us as servants and primitives. They laughed at our request for respect. Well, now they are about to learn what happens when the servants decide to leave." The human leaders nodded in agreement. They had all seen the mockery in the council chamber. They had all felt the sting of alien arrogance for too many years. Now it was time for the galaxy to see what humanity was truly worth. Dr. Hyenwu, the elderly scientist who had developed the quantum relay technology, shook his head sadly. 50 years of cooperation, and they never bothered to understand what we were really doing. They saw the surface and thought that was all there was. "Their loss," replied General Taemin grimly. "Our intelligence report suggests they still think this is temporary. They believe we will come back begging for their approval within a year." President AI smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Then they are about to discover just how wrong they can be. We have been preparing for this moment for decades. We can survive without them, but can they survive without us?" The answer to that question was about to become very clear to everyone in the galaxy.